very much for speaking to me. And congratulations
Yeah,
on Sarafina. I finally got to read it. I loved it. So good.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
So the first, so, I mean, the first thing, probably the best place to start is I think it was on Instagram that you said that you feel that this may be the scariest book that you've written so far. Why would you
Yeah.
say that to people listening? Why do you think this is the scariest one for you?
Um, I think that it landed in a way that I was really happy with as far as the scares were concerned. I think when I think of my other books like A Child Alone with Strangers, is a lot of it's more of a thrills than scares.
Right.
Um, Whereas like Boys in the Valley certainly has a lot of dread and certainly has some like moments. Um, I felt like the way I constructed Serafina was was unique in the way that in the sense that it was built very carefully. I was kind of I assembled the world uh very you know uh I took my time with it, I'll say, and I wanted to really
Right.
establish this world and sync the brothers, the characters of the brothers, really, give them roots in this time period. And then the way the horror unveils, if you will, um, I thought was probably it was the happiest I'd been with the way that I'd presented horror to to a readership, and
Right.
I feel like it was having conversations with early readers that it was almost more like it was almost more like in Boys in the Valley. I think you're sort of experiencing what's going on with the boys, uh, kind of in a more cinematic way,
Right.
and I feel like with Serafina, it's more immersive, and
100% agree. Yeah.
so that's why I think it, in my humble opinion, I think it's probably the scariest book I've written. Now, whether that's the scariest book you've read or read by me, that's out of my control. But as
Yeah.
far as the way I constructed it as an author, I felt that it was the scariest book I had written today,
Right.
and still is. I've written a couple since then. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, but just as far as the way how immersive it is, and how you get it's almost like you get kind of ensnared in this sticky spider web and
Right.
you can't
Uh,
really get out of it. Yeah.
what I loved about this one is exactly, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head there. It really is really so immersive. I'm Whenever a book is deals with the supernatural, it really needs to be believable for me with kind of really grounded element, which it all has, and because of the how immersive it is. So I'm quite curious, why you decided to go for kind of, I'd kind of describe it as a kind of a grim fairy tale meets a Civil War story. Um,
Yeah.
Probably the closest sibling would be Daniel Krause's Angel Down, quite a recent release, which was a fantastic book as well. Um,
Hmm.
that was also really so immersive. So I'm quite curious, why did you decide to kind of make a book that was so immersive, but set it in a kind of a civil war, which a lot of us can't really imagine having been in because it was such a long time ago. Make it so
Yeah.
immersive and tell the story that you wanted to tell in that setting.
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways, much like probably Daniel's book, I think one of the nice things about creating a period piece is that you take the reader away from the real world.
Yeah,
I think when you set something in a contemporary setting, you're kind of constantly reminding them of things that are going on in their own life. Um, if you mention cell phones, they think of their cell phone. If you mention traffic, they think of traffic. If
right,
you mention, whatever, going out to a movie, they think about going out. Even if it's subconscious, you're distracting the reader with reality.
hmm,
And I think when you take something like A Boys in the Valley or Serafina, which are both historical fiction, um, you're trans you're transporting the reader to a place where they have no ties, where they have no modern qualifications for what's happening. So they have to either they have to either completely go in or or put the book down. So I think that's always a decision for me. I try not to set books, my stories, and it is somewhat purposeful, although I've broken this rule. But I do try and set my stories so they're not current, modern day. I said now that doesn't mean like, so for example, um, third rule of time travel is actually set in the future, so that gives it a sort of its own sort of story world
Yeah.
that with even though it's not flying cars and stuff, it's still like it's like 30 years ahead of us, and there's different technologies, and then you know uh even Child Alone with Strangers, which you would call a contemporary story, was set in the 90s,
Yeah.
1990s. I have a book coming out next year from Union Square called The Blue Butterfly, which is a modern book, but it's set in the 80s. So, and it's not just because I want to get away from cell phones and the internet. It's also because I want these story worlds to feel more like story worlds. And
And
so
it transports us away. Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's much easier to transport a reader's imagination if you are setting it in a historical setting. And you get to also like it's almost like building a science fiction world in a way, even though it's based on facts, but a lot of hard science fiction, even ones that take place on remote planets, or if you're thinking about Rama, they're still based on theoretical facts. And so, they try and make the gravity seem real. They try and make the atmosphere seem real, even if it's a different planet. So I think in that way, by doing something that's set during the American Civil War, um, I'm kind of in a way creating like this alien planet,
Yeah.
where these things are taking place. And
Mhm.
and I think it has that same feeling that readers get when they read fantasy or they read science fiction of that nature. They feel like they're entering a whole different world, and the story is taking place in an more isolated way. That I think, to go back to their original point, immerses them more into what's happening.
At the same time, whilst it wasn't a distraction, obviously it's completely by happenstance and the worst happenstance possible. That there's so much war going on right now that
Yeah,
your book really delves into kind of patriotism, liability, responsibility, and all these kinds of things. And I couldn't help drawing parallels with the current kind of climate. But I mean, I'm guessing that
yeah.
that was just complete, utter, the worst possible happenstance that could happen.
Yeah,
No?
coincidence. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I wrote this book I wrote Sarafina. Gosh, I think it was 2023. So,
Right.
it was a different world then. It was
Yeah.
different president, and we had different. Nobody was thinking about going to war in 2023. We didn't see why it would even be on the radar, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but I do think what happens in a lot of books is they become timely on and off again. As the world changes and evolves and things happen. The thing with literature and fiction is, the themes are always prevalent. You always want your themes to be, to your point, things of like uh, patriotism or loyalty, familial loyalty, which is
Yeah.
a big theme in this book. Those are evergreen, right? But they just kind of, but as far as the real world is concerned, sometimes they're more topical than not. If you read a book about the plague, the Black Plague, it was much more topical in 2020, or
Sure.
whatever,
Yeah.
than it would have been 5 years. So yeah, so I think those things come and go, ebb and flow, and I think with fiction is you always want the themes to be human and societal and relatable,
Hmm.
so that people can connect with them. Even though you're setting it, if my story takes place on a spaceship, I still want the human themes to be relatable,
Hmm.
so that readers can connect with the characters. So yeah, I think it was just an unhappy coincidence
Very, very.
that it's
Yeah.
coming out right now while we're in the midst of what we're in the midst of, the real horrors of the world.
Mhm.
But it is interesting, and especially when you talk about, I think, not that I want to get into politics at all, but
No,
but
sure.
it is interesting when you get into there's some parts in the book where the son, the narrator, Ethan, is describing how he was basically fighting for the Confederacy because he lives in the South and his father fought for the South, and it was just what they did, was what him and his the
Yeah.
way he was raised. There's a lot of uh you know about family loyalty and kind of like the things that you're tied to, you're anchored with. And I think
Mhm.
there are people in today's world who are forced to make hard decisions between what they think and what their parents think.
Yeah.
When you look at the spectrum right now that we're dealing with the United States,
Yeah. I mean,
there are a lot of older people who are, or who have grown up a certain way, Republican or Democrat, and I think there's a lot of kids now who are, you see more and more where they're like having these tough conversations with their family members because the morality and has changed and
yeah.
on a global scale.
Yeah. I mean, something that I wrote down specifically was Ethan, the kind of the main character in the book. He's convinced that he's destined to have a short life because he's been chosen as a sacrifice for this war. Um, was that kind of almost like a genesis for this story that you wanted to kind of examine the reasons why people go to war? Was that kind of the spark
No,
block? No.
no, it wasn't. No, I mean, it ended up becoming something that I definitely, delved into. But no, really, the genesis of the story was I wanted to write a story about brotherhood, like
Right.
literal brotherhood, meaning like I grew up with, four brothers. I'm the youngest of six in my family, so I have
Right.
four brothers and a sister, and I have, brothers-in-law who had become blood,
Yeah.
and so I really wanted to get into sort of the push and pull of and the loyalty we talked a little bit about, and also just like the need to be accepted by older siblings, and the way the older siblings, how you have to kind of earn that respect. And I was kind of thought what I thought was interesting about it was by putting these three brothers and their sister, but the three brothers primarily into this situation, where the youngest brother is trying so hard to embody the quote unquote virtues of these older brothers, but the older brothers are not good people, right? And I thought that was interesting because it's like, and Ethan has flaws, as you find out as the book goes on. So I thought it was interesting for me as a writer to kind of create this very traditional need for him to want to be, for Ethan to be accepted, by Mason and Archie, his older brothers.
Yeah.
But knowing that as readers, you're knowing that Mason and Archie are not good people,
Yeah.
but that desire to be accepted is still there. By Ethan, and it's kind of like a flaw, right? Where he's and Ellie is sort of his twin sister. She ends up becoming kind of this uh this kind of, I don't want to say glue, but sort of like this whatever, this like this gluey kind of uh connection between Ethan and his brothers, where she's kind of the voice of morality. And she's kind of saying, you don't need to be like them. You could be like me. You could be like our mother was. And for him to kind of like have that struggle between the masculinity, is toxic masculinity slash, the paternal issues that he's dealing with versus like this sort of angel on his shoulder saying, you don't have to be this way. All of that was all part of what I wanted to examine with the book. And then
Hmm.
as I got into the war, um, the Civil War aspects, the soldier aspects, that just kind of became more fleshed out as the characters became more fleshed out. And really, it really tied into that sense of, like I mentioned earlier, that sense of loyalty to his, but not even loyalty, that sense of imprisonment to his father's beliefs
Yeah.
was a huge, was something I definitely wanted to analyze and look at more in depth. and to see how that would affect him. And I thought it was really interesting. I thought in a lot of ways, I feel like Ethan's father with his relationship with his father was in a lot of ways um, one of the more interesting dynamics of the story for me. I love the way that that relationship evolved from the beginning to the end of the book. I thought was whereas at the well, I can't spoil anything, but
Yeah.
there's definitely an evolution. You know, his arc is definitely tied heavily to his father, which
His father, 100%. Yeah.
and his father isn't really even in a lot of the book, but in just enough so that you understand how
Yeah.
he's becoming the
How he's
man
tied
he
to his father.
becomes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and how he becomes the man he becomes, by the end.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, obviously, I'm curious what I mean. You said the book set in the Civil War, but most of it is set in this kind of safe haven, if you will, that they find whilst they're kind of trying to escape war. Was that always your intention to kind of create this parenthesis, this place where they could, where things that wouldn't normally bubble to the surface in natural times of war were able to bubble to the surface in this kind of pocket that you created, or did the was or was basically was that this pocket, was that always an intentional thing that you were going to place there to give the characters time to kind of reckon with themselves about things that they wouldn't normally have had time to reckon with amidst the Civil War whilst fighting?
Yeah, I mean, it was always the intention that that Serafina's homestead was going to become a sort of a story world within the story. Kind of like a separate, like it's almost like they leave the real world and enter this sort of alternate universe,
Yeah,
in a way. And yeah, Serafina is, the Serafina experience, we'll call it,
yeah,
um, is was really like a way for me to was a way for me to hold up a mirror to the brothers
yeah,
and hold it for them to see themselves as they really were. And I think that starts with the fact that when they get there, they have to shave and change their clothes, and now all of a sudden they shave their heads because they have lights and all that stuff,
yeah,
and they're immediately infantilized,
yeah.
by
Right.
Serafina, and it's kind of like this weird rebirth, and from there she basically, you know, she allows them to see who they are. She allows them the space to figure out who they really are. And even she is fooled, right, to a degree. Um, but but that was always that was sort of their pollinization, if you will, of and even what happens to Archie was sort of like him sort of becoming who he really, in a lot of ways, who he really was as a, and Mason in a way too. They all kind of, so yeah, it took all of their attributes and physicalized them. And I thought that was always sort of the intention, was that I sort of saw the book as, when I first was imagining it and outlining it, I sort of saw the book as the first part is very much based in hard reality, with with very real challenges, like the home guard, chasing them down, and
Yeah.
bandits and starvation and all these and man versus nature elements. And then it became sort of, for me, in a way, almost like a dark fantasy for a big part of the book. And then before going kind of like in the final act, kind of going back to that sort of reality. And so yeah, that was always the idea, was it was always going to be sort of it was always supposed to feel like a different experience. And I think that's a lot of what happens with between Serafina and Ethan in particular when they have their date night, we'll call it. A lot of that
Yeah.
is supposed to kind of reveal to the reader that what's happening here is not real world stuff. It's a very different, almost fantastical fairy tale, element to the overall story.
Uh-huh. And I mean, what I really appreciate about the fact that you kind of created this pocket was the fact that it's a coming of age story, but because Ethan is how is he 17? Was it 16, 17? I can't remember.
17,
17
17,
when he's
yeah.
thrown into the war. there's no time for there to be a coming of age story because he's just thrown into this violence. So I mean I really appreciate the fact that you're able to kind of get them in this bubble and then through
Yeah, I
that
mean,
create this
it's
coming of age story.
literally, in a lot of ways, it's literally like a bubble, right? It's literally like the
Yeah,
its own thing. Yes, I don't want to give anything away to
yeah.
readers,
No,
but
no,
yeah,
no.
so for sure, it was definitely that way, and it was, and what was interesting about Ethan and the coming of age element was that 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 whole, he keeps lying to himself about his nature and who he is, and he's a bit of an unreliable narrator, and I thought being able to fill in the blanks versus showing the reader his past in real time, being able to reveal pieces of his past as the story progressed, I thought was that was I thought was a uh, it allowed me to kind of extend that false reality a little bit longer
Yeah.
of and so yeah, I feel like I'm talking in such vague terms that readers don't understand what
No, no.
I'm talking about, but
They
if you
will
read
do
the
when they
book you'll
read
know what
it.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but so
They
I
need to
but
read it.
I enjoyed sharing, divulging parts of him as the story went on versus like front loading everything, as it
Uh-huh.
were.
I'm also very curious why you decided for Ethan to have a twin sister at home. Obviously, Ethan says that he gets this sense like twins often say that they can kind of feel pain and feel sensation.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that was the main kind of reason why you wanted to have him have a twin sister at home.
Yeah, Ellie was very important. And her role in the book actually expanded as the story went on, and I realized how key she was to what was happening to Ethan. Yeah, I mean, she is basically like I said, she's the angel on his shoulder, and because they lose their mother, when they're very young, they're kind of raised by this somewhat oppressive father, um, who has some very difficult, problematic views on things. Um, yeah, I think Ellie was, she was kind of the balance, the yin to his yang, if you will. And I thought you
Yeah.
needed that because I think without Ellie's morality and conscience, I think you would have it would there wouldn't be anything to balance that the darkness of the story, and even in her strength, when she comes into full play, we'll call it, in the
Mhm.
novel, when we reach her, when she becomes part of the present story. um I needed her strength and her wisdom to also kind of be a reflection on Ethan and all the things that how she is all the things that he was not. How he you know how he was in some ways a coward, and how he was in some ways, many ways, immoral, and and I think what was really interesting for me with her was as that she sort of is re she he is sort of revealed to her real time, as I'm revealing things to the reader, and I
Mhm.
thought that was important as well. And she ends up, of course, being a pivotal. So yeah, I don't I guess I would answer it most easily by saying that she was very important for to kind of be the counterbalance to his weight in the story. I needed something that was a reflection of him, and kind of showed him in all of his, uh, you know, as the person he really was. And I think
Yeah, and his true
so that
colors. Yeah.
it's true. And I think I needed her to be that representation for his character. So yeah, and then of course what happens between, I don't again, the way she progresses, um, um, you know, becomes important to me, is important to me and important to the story. I'm trying not to give anything away.
Yeah.
Uh,
No. Oh, yeah.
but as things, as all these worlds kind of combine, we'll say, um, for the way she decides to move forward, it was huge, because that was basically the moment when um, it's almost like God is casting judgment on this world of sinners in a way, and it was kind of like the flood coming and wiping everything out. I don't know. To my mind, it was very like biblical in a way that she became this um, harbinger of sort of was not of truth, but just the way the way it ends is like was always the way it was going to end. So I guess
Yeah, yeah.
I guess that's
Uh-huh.
the easiest way to
I'm
put it.
curious.
Yeah,
I'm
because it
curious.
was
No,
yeah,
I know it's really difficult to not spoil it because when she comes into the story in a big way later on, sure.
yeah,
Um, but I'm also curious. Did you always want Ellie to be a sister? Was it always going to be a sister, a female, like you said, the yin
yeah,
to the yang?
yeah.
Um,
It was always the four from the very yeah the from the like the very when I wrote a one paragraph summary, it was always the three brothers and the twin sister
uh-huh.
and the father and the mother who dies very early, but still plays a part in flashbacks or whatever. But yeah, so the family unit was there from the very beginning.
No, the main reason I ask you that because if Ellie had been a brother, I don't think I don't know, but obviously I don't want to give anything away. But I feel that because it's a sister, it's also kind of a redemptive story in a way, without explaining. I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and I think it's just also I needed her to show it was important to me that she be a symbol of strength in the story, that she be the she's almost in a, she's almost like almost playing the role of like a saint or a martyr in a way, like but and the things that happen to her are horrible, and the fact that she has the strength to overcome the things that have happened to her was such a counterbalance, like I said, to what's happening with Ethan. And so yeah, it's just, I think whenever you're writing a story, especially a novel, um, you want to make sure that there's balance and to not just to the tone, but to the characters. And I think if the characters are all to one thing, then it just feels like it feels kind of top heavy.
Yeah,
And so for me, when I'm coming up with a cast of characters, we'll call it, I always want to have everything, the all the important elements represented so that there's that story balance. Because I think otherwise, because I think the readers, people who are reading the book, want to feel that they want to feel like different
like
sides are being
push and
taken
pull. Yeah.
and being like argued on the page, not just off the page. So yeah, but yeah, no, Ellie was always a twin from the very beginning, and she was always a key component. Um, and I knew actually interestingly, the first, and I don't think this has ever happened to me before, other than this book. But the first thing I wrote for this book was the last chapter.
Really?
And I
Uh-huh.
don't think I've ever done that before. Yeah, because I think at the time I was like, I want to get this out of my head because I had it was so visual. And I had it like, I didn't want to lose it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
But
so
there's,
if you remember that last chapter, I knew everything that was going to happen,
uh-huh.
and that was before I even outlined the whole thing. So I really wanted to get down that last chapter. So all of that I knew was where we were headed. And then it became
Uh-huh.
about how are we going to get there?
So you wrote the last chapter, but I'm guessing you didn't reverse engineer everything though. You just kind of you wrote that chapter and then you went to chapter one and figured
Yep.
out A, B, C
Yeah,
to get
I
to Z.
wrote that first chapter. I think I labeled it Sarafina last chapter or whatever. I
We
think at the
have to
time it was
get
called.
there.
Yeah, I think, and then yeah, then it's kind of like set it aside. But I knew in my head, and usually, in most of my books, I know the ending in my head. I'm a pretty big outliner,
Yeah,
for most of my.
do you usually get to the ending that you initially
Yeah,
decide on? Yeah.
yeah, I would say like 80% of the time I get
Right.
there. I don't know if, I've published I think 8 novels, and yeah, I think almost all of them I knew the ending before I started writing. But it was interesting because this was the situation where, like I said, actually wrote that entire chapter. Um, because I had such a strong idea of what the beats of the story, the primary beats of the story were going to be, that
Uh-huh.
I felt confident in writing that chapter, which involves a lot of the characters. Um,
Can I ask you what was the
uh,
specific kind of light bulb moment that made you decide to write that chapter just out of the blue, because rather than kind of going from the beginning?
I actually could tell, I do know the light bulb moment, um, but it would be a spoiler.
Okay. So you can't tell me then.
But it was, I had a very specific, um, image in
Right.
my head. And that image, which is probably the apex of that chapter from a horror perspective, that was the image that I had in my head. So I kind of, yeah, and how I got that, I couldn't tell you. I think
Uh-huh.
it just sometimes, when you're thinking about, okay, well, this is this, because originally, okay, so the story, when I first outlined this story, I was like, it was like 3 or 4 paragraphs, less than a page, three quarters
Yeah.
of a page maybe. And I was just basically like, brothers go to war, then this happens, then they find Sarafina. That's not a spoiler. And then this happens, and then I was kind of like, and then oh, okay, then this, and then and so when I had that outline down, sometimes, and sometimes this happens. This is usually a sign of a book when I know a book should be written versus maybe a book should not be written, is if I can immediately visualize all these different scenes, specific scenes within that 3 paragraph outline.
Right.
And it just, and when I allow my brain to focus on that story, and scenes start popping into my head fully formed, that's when I know I've got a story that I'm excited about writing. So it's just, other than that, it's just, there's really no specific catalyst other than I just allowed my imagination to begin fleshing out, this very rudimentary
Uh-huh.
outline.
Right. You mentioned that obviously that you had this image in your head that kind of sparked the story. Now, I'm quite curious how you worked with, because it was originally released with, who was it originally released with?
It was originally released by Earthling Publications.
Earthling, and it had a lot of art on there, artwork.
Yeah.
So I'm quite curious how you worked with the artist for that, and then also it's got quite a few variations as well for the new release through
Mhm.
Flash and with Black Crow Books.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm guessing it was quite important for you that that what they portrayed was nothing that would give away anything that was in the original image that you came up with in your head.
Yeah. There are some spoilers in the imagery.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
there
trying to think
definitely
now.
are. But if you, well, think about near the end. Um, there's a picture, there's an illustration of Serafina that's a bit of a spoiler. But I was okay with that because it was out of context. I think outside of context. And look, look, I'm of the mindset. I'm a book collector as well as a writer. So I have a lot of deluxe limited editions in my library, like
Yeah.
hundreds. So I'm used to seeing illustrations in books. And my thing is like if you're fast forwarding to look at images from the last quarter of the book, then that's on you. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
have to assume they're telling you stuff you don't want to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But so that was kind of my attitude with at least I don't think I would have done it if it was say a trade edition. I
Yeah.
probably would
Right.
not have done the interior artwork to the extent that we did with the deluxe edition.
Yeah.
But the deluxe edition, you're talking about 300 copies. It's not, or I guess there were 750 copies of that
Uh-huh.
book, but you're talking about a very limited number of copies. But
Yeah.
the artist for that, yeah, the art was beautiful for that book. It was unfortunately it sold out so fast. A lot of people didn't get one, and it was always a bummer. But is Chris Nurse was the artist,
Right.
and Paul Miller is the publisher for Earthling. And Paul and I have done a few books together now, and we're buddies. And so he and I talked a lot about actually who would be the right artist for this. And we looked at a few different artists. He and I went back and forth on a few different names, and then landed on Chris. And and the front cover, which I think is probably one of the most beautiful front covers of any of my books, if not the most beautiful front cover of any of my books. Um, that was something where I just gave him the basic idea. I said I just want a cabin and a woman's, face sort of, and I want it very cosmic. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and he knocked it out of the park. We went through. I'm usually very against character faces
Yeah.
in my books, illustrations of character faces, because I don't like the reader to have to. I like the reader to have their
I
own.
like to read to
Um,
paint their own kind of
yeah. So, but I
portrait.
figured
Yeah.
this one we were kind of keeping it sort of. It was sort of keeping it sort of vague, you know. But the point is that we went through. That was the part of the cover that was the hardest because he. I think I made him go. I think I made poor Chris. I think I made him go through like 4 or 5 different
Right.
faces before we got to one that I was happy with. And so yeah, so the interior artwork for that book was just it's easily my favorite artwork of anything that's been created based on my own
Yeah.
work. I just think the way he did those like old style silver chrome illustrations. Man, there's one in there of a scene where the brothers are confronted by some bandits, and that image in particular was like one of my favorite things ever. And the first image I saw was because Sarafina has a young son named Titus, who's like a 10-year-old boy, which
Yeah.
is not a spoiler, it's on the jacket. Um, and one of the first images that Chris did was of Titus standing by the peach tree, by the pear tree, sorry. Um,
Right.
and that one I was so excited. So yeah, so we when I work with an artist, because I've done a lot of books I worked with a lot of wonderful artists like Glenn Chadbourne and Francois Valancourt and Ben Baldwin and goes Vinny and the Vinny Chong. And the thing is, with you always want to give them this you want to give them like I usually give them like a list of ideas. So I'll
Yeah.
say like what and so there's 2 things you got to take into consideration. The one thing you have to take into consideration is that these are going to be printed in the book as the story's going. So you don't want to have
Yeah.
to give them 3 ideas
Because
that are
they
within
will,
5 pages of each other.
because I mean, not yeah, and those images will kind of skew the story that the reader
Well,
has painted for themselves. No,
yeah,
that
yeah,
because there's quite a few books that quite a few authors are actually kind of turning to, especially ones like Chris Panettiere and there's a few others who are actually artists themselves that they actually add
yeah.
faces and stuff, and I asked them, it's like, is that not kind of going against yourself because the reader for the first 200 300 pages has created an idea in their head and you give them this
Yeah.
picture and it flips the story on its head maybe.
Yeah, I think it's true. And that's I'm like I said, I'm usually really against it. In this book, there are a lot of character images. In this book in particular, or Seraphina in particular, there wasn't a lot. We kind of had to rely on using the characters, but I did working with Chris and Paul. We did make it, I think, kept it sort of vague. And also there wasn't as much we didn't get into real detail with the imagery for one thing, but also this was a story where you kind of knew what these characters were in a way. Like these are I described them, and they're you know you, they're all kind of you kind of know what you're looking at in a way. Um,
uh,
but even so, I don't like to do it. I did another cover for Paul Miller and Earthling that just came out for Autumn Springs Retirement Home
right.
Massacre, and
That looks fantastic. I couldn't get hold of that, but yeah, that was beautiful.
oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. But that was where they put Rose Dubois' face on the cover. And
Yeah.
and Paul knows I don't like to do that, but he was like, but just look at it because I think it's really
Yeah.
good. And I did like the way they did it because it was like a juxtaposition between Rose and this killer, this faceless killer.
Right.
And I did kind of think that was pretty cool. But again, I went back. I think we went through like 3 iterations, and I was sending imagery saying, no, 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 that's not what Rose looks like. This is what Rose looks.
Yeah.
So that was a situation where right on the cover, I'm giving you an idea of what Rose Dubois kind of looks like. But again, it's a
Yeah.
limited edition. I kind of have different rules for the limiteds. But for
Yeah.
trade edition, if it was up to me, I would never want a character on the cover. And to your point, I would never want a character to be revealed halfway through the book, where this is what they look like, where I'm
Yeah.
giving you like a very detailed sketch of their face, and all of a sudden as a reader, like, oh, wait a minute, that's not at all I was imagining.
Yeah.
Um, I think that would be weird, and I prefer to let the reader have that visual. But yeah, but with the limited editions, I tend to be a little less anal about it. But
Yeah. No, no, no.
for the
I agree. 'Cause,
trades,
yeah,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
like it.
Black Crow books, for example, is just really. I was never really a book collector per se. I typically bought, well, I'd either read on my Kobo or I'd buy trade the typical trade editions. But Black Crow books is just fantastic. They're putting out some great books of late, and I've got a great
Yeah,
collection.
I, I'm so excited to work with them. We've been having conversations for a while, um, and we're actually doing more stuff that hasn't been announced yet.
Right,
But it's probably going to be announced very soon. So yeah, but that initial 3 book deal I did with them, I was very excited about. So they did Gothic, Sarafina, and they're doing Gothic 2, which is called
yeah,
Gothic the End, which I'm writing right now. I'm like right at the end of that book. So as soon as we're done, I'm gonna keep going. That's coming out next April. So yeah, so it's really, and then we just did a deal for a couple other things. So yeah, so I love working with those guys. They're the whole broken, they're part of Broken Binding, who I've always been a big fan
the
of.
same. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jamie Lee is the publisher for Black Crow. I think Sean is the guy who owns Broken Binding. So yeah, they've been great to work with, and I knew they'd done right by other writers who are friends of mine, like Keith Rawson. Um, so I had those. So yeah, I was excited to work with them, and I'm but even the cover you mentioned, the cover for Seraphina, and I have one right here. But like like even this cover, for example, has like
All right.
the
Yeah,
character, right? It's a beautiful
yeah.
stain they did.
Uh-huh. They've
The
also
U.S.
done
edition,
there's also a hardback version of that now as well.
there's a hardback of this
Special
coming out,
deluxe edition. Yeah,
a deluxe limited hardcover that's going to be where everything's going to be instead of red, everything's going to be green.
fantastic. And there's kind of like a
This
gun,
and
a
this,
rifle, and things inside the cover. No, that's the
yeah,
Clash.
and just to give the proper props to my U.S. publisher and artist.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is
this
the Joel
okay.
A.G. did the art. Yeah, so this is like this gives you like real heavy folktale vibes, and this is kind of
Yeah,
gives you kind of more kind of
very
horror
different.
vibes with the cabin and everything. But even this is my point I was gonna make was even this I was like I went back to them on this face
Yeah.
like three times, and I
Uh-huh.
was like no.
Move it a bit
So
higher, a bit higher, a bit higher.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So I'm very like cautious about that stuff. And but it's fun to work with artists, and it's fun to see the different ideas. Like if you compare these two again to show him telling him one more time, like both of these, I went back and forth with both artists
Yeah.
multiple times. We went, we
Uh,
really worked hard to get it right. So it's one of my favorite things to do with my books is whether it be a trade or a deluxe edition is to try and get that art the perfect,
yeah.
the right tone and everything. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to work with like these wonderful artists, especially in the
Uh,
deluxe editions.
but no, I agree with you with the deluxe editions because I usually buy the deluxe edition if I've already read the book and I know I love it and I want a deluxe edition, so I already know what's in there anyway, and it's really
Yeah,
special. Yeah,
right.
100%.
Yeah, yeah. With Paul Miller at Earthling, he tends to try and buy books as first run. He likes to
Yeah.
book. He likes to be the first run. And with Serafina, it just worked out. So Serafino was originally supposed to come out from Tor Nightfire
All right.
um, as part of my deal with them, and we ended up just having like not being able to connect creatively, which happens sometimes on what they saw the book being, what I saw the book
All
being.
right.
So we pivoted and we moved Serafina to Clash and Black Crow, and then gave Tor Nightfire the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre.
Right.
So as second part of that book deal. So yeah, so sometimes you have to do that as a I think as a writer if you don't feel like you never want to change your book. At least for me, I'm pretty I'm pretty intense about it, but I know about like no, that's not the story I want to tell. Um,
Yeah.
but I know a lot of writers. I won't name names because it's not my story to tell. But I know a very famous writer, for example, who literally ended his big five deal because they moved a semicolon or took out a semicolon.
Took out a
Like not,
semicolon.
and that was
No
it. That was
way.
the end of that. That was the end of his working relationship with them. So, and I know a couple of writers who are like that. And I'm not quite that
But
extreme,
no,
although
I think you need to be like that. I was watching an interview. I think it was it Chad Palahniuk? I can't remember now. And he was saying that he had a
probably
similar problem with with a publisher, and they said that there were certain bits that they didn't like, and he actually offered to change those bits, and then they said that they didn't like the book at all. They thought it was disgusting and horrible, and
Yeah,
that was
that
the
was
end of
kind of
the
what
story.
happened. That was kind of what happened with
And
Serafina.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that because not just, I mean, for you as a writer, that's the best thing that you could do. Is you need to write the story that you want to tell. Otherwise, you're just writing something for someone else's benefit. Alfred
Right.
Hitchcock is someone that I always mention that all of his films, but he said that he made them for himself. He didn't make them for anybody else. And
Yeah.
I guess if you start changing things for the publishing house or whatever, you lose. I'm sure you'd lose interest in the stories that you're writing in the end.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are editorial changes which are, I mean, which are like on Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, for example. My editor at Tor, really improved that book in my mind, and the way she had a pretty major request, and I had to think about it for like a week. Like I was torn up about it, honestly. And I was
Yeah.
talking to my agent and talking to my wife and talking to my fellow authors and friends. And so I was really, because I didn't know. And it's hard. It's like, is that right? Like, what is, because you want it to be the best book you can be. But ultimately, I 100% think she was right. Because I think the book is better now. So, and same with
Mhm.
the great editors I worked with at Orbit. They had some really good comments about third rule of time travel. And I ended up changing some things with third rule of time travel. So I'm very open to edits, and I'm very open to changing the story to make the story better. But
Yeah.
what I don't want to do is write a book that I don't believe in. And I
Mhm.
think that with Serafina, there was a lot more controversy about. It's a pretty dark book, like we said at the very head of the conversation. And I think it was still too dark in some ways, and I didn't want to go. I wanted those elements there. So yeah, so ended up just taking it
Mhm.
to a different publisher, which
I
happened.
think you mentioned Orbit there. You had a lot of discussions. Orbit's that's the UK publisher, right?
Orbit published the third rule of time travel in the US and
In
the
the
UK,
US. Oh,
and then
that's right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was getting mixed up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
Orbit, but Orbit published Boys in the Valley and Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre in the UK,
Hmm. No,
whereas Tor Nightfire was the US publisher.
yeah, so that was what I was going to say. So I mean, you've got Tor on one side, Orbit on the other, and where do those two meet? Because if you're releasing the same book in different countries, where kind of in terms of editing and decisions
So
of where the story goes,
yeah,
where do those two meet?
typically it's the editor who acquired the book is the one who you would get notes from. So in other words, if I sold the book to Tor,
Right.
and so and then Orbit acquired the UK rights from Tor. So in that case, at least in practice, or usually I would only be dealing with a US editor, and then
Right.
and then Orbit would get what they got.
Yeah.
Um, But in this case, very, in the case of Serafina, I had two editors, the UK editor and the US editor, both giving me notes, and I think that might have been part of where it just became where the book was becoming something different. I think there was maybe
Right.
too many voices on that, but then so yeah, but usually it's just whoever acquires the book that's your editor.
You
So
can
for example, my next
yeah.
book with Union Square. My next book's with Union Square, which is Hachette, and my editor there at Union Square will be the person who I will be working with. I won't be working with Black Crow on edits or
Right.
whoever ends up acquiring the book for UK. There's a couple of publishers in play, but
So
yeah,
you just
so
be working with Black Crow, for example, with the artwork and nothing else.
right, correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's what's called the acquiring editor, the editor who buys the book.
Yeah.
That's who you
Got
typically would be dealing with. Yeah, yeah. And
uh-huh,
then
uh-huh.
everyone else just gets what they get. Sometimes they'll like request um minor changes, maybe just because it's an English edition, maybe there's something that maybe doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. for the like versus
Yeah.
U.S. readers versus UK readers, but those are minor and few and far between.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's English people are,
They want to add
there's
some.
not
They
much to
want to add
change.
weird. They want to add weird U's to words for no reason,
Yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
color. Like what? Yeah, no.
Uh-huh. Good, but going back to kind of the imagery and stuff, I'm really, really excited to pick up the new volume 4 of Creepshow, which you are
Hmm.
involved in. I'm quite curious.
Yeah,
Can you? I mean, obviously, you mentioned there how you work with artists and stuff. Was it a similar kind of work? I'm guessing you've got a copy over there somewhere already.
yeah. I was gonna do a little show and tell for you. Let's
Brilliant.
see if I. Yeah. So this is the cover. Now this is the cover of the. So there's like multiple. Okay. So there's the. So I'm. So this collects
Because
volume
they,
4, issues 1 through 5.
yeah,
But
because
then you can buy.
they usually release like is it 2 or 3, and then they release it as like a hardback version of
You're
those.
right. So you could have just bought the comic that just has my story. Let's see, my story and a story from Alex Packnadel. Sorry, I'm butchering probably that. But yeah, and then but then you can see here the table of contents. It's all these are the issues that are combined. So there's
Yeah,
5 issues, and it's all combined in this one volume. And there's
yeah. This
also a
is the one.
hardcover of this
The
coming out.
hardcover is the one I want to get hold of. Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't want to give any spoilers for the for those reading Creepshow, but I'll just give you a do I hate the spoiler, man? I'll see if I can show you an image that's not a spoiler. That's also kind of fun. Well, here's it. That's the first. That's the first. But yeah, so I worked with an
yeah,
artist named Robert Carey. Um, this was one of the this is one of the funner experiences of my career was
yeah,
writing this story for Creepshow. Yeah, it's just it's such a different muscle, creative muscle.
But
Writing a
what
script.
comes first though? Is it do you write in unison with the artist, or do you write the whole thing first and then get in touch with the artist? How does it work?
So right. So what first I do is I come up with a concept, which I then pitch. The editor, who is awesome to work with at Creepshow at Image, he then you work with him on sort of the story. He maybe has feedback on the concept, and then you write a script, um, which is literally like page 1. This is the frame. This is what they say. This is the you're describing the image, dialogue, image, dialogue, image, dialogue. It's kind of like a screenplay,
Storyboarding.
but
Yeah.
it's storyboarding, yeah. And but you don't actually draw anything. It's just the descriptions. So then you work on that script with the editor until everyone's happy with it. And then once that script is finalized, then it goes to the artist. And
Right.
at that point, not much changes story wise. The artist pretty much worked with it. The only thing the comments you might get back are more technical in nature, meaning like the artist might suggest that maybe there's too many. But this usually happens with the editor anyway. But maybe there's too many frames on a page; it's too crowded, or maybe this image. But like for my story, for example, and this was really interesting. So it has to be 10 pages, okay,
Right.
for Creepshow. So you have 10 pages to work with to tell your story. And you have to tell that, and you have to tell it in these like little boxes, right? These little frames. And so it's pretty tight. You can't like, it's not a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
But so I wrote a 10 page thing. And even to me, it was like, man, this is like, I'm packing in a lot of information, right?
Yeah.
Into this 10 pages. And then the artist came back, Robert Carey, who I chose. I asked if he could do it because I'd seen his other work and it was
Right.
amazing. And he did such an amazing job. But the artist came back and said, "Hey, what'd be cool is if we did this final page as a 2 page spread." And which was amazing, and which we did. But what that meant was I now had to condense the story into 9 pages, basically.
Yeah.
I lost a page. Yeah. So I had to rewrite the
Uh-huh.
script to accommodate that idea. So we kind of did. We did. It was a bit of a last minute overall. So in that situation, we changed it. I mean, it was ultimately up to me, but I was like, oh yeah, that would be killer to have this big 2 page finale,
Yeah.
final image. So yeah, that's what we did. And but yeah, so it was really fun. I loved the process. I would love to do another comic book. I know so many of my writer friends um, do comic books. Christopher Gold and Clay McLeod Chapman.
Yeah.
And my friend Ben does. does them for like Marvel and does,
Yeah,
like
there's
Wolverine and
loads. Downward
Punisher.
crowds as well. There's all kinds of yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Cross. Yeah, so it's even Stephen Graham Jones. Yeah, so it's a really fun medium, and it's a different, like I said, it's a different muscle to flex. So you're just not
I was
like
gonna. Yeah.
not so worried about prose. You're more like you have to kind of like figure out how to tell the story with like very limited description and
Dialogue.
very limited dialogue. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
between writing screenplays, writing comics, and writing fiction, those are all, and even short fiction versus long fiction, those are all very different mediums. They're all
Yeah.
very, you approach each one very differently. So it's fun to always do something that's outside of
I'll
your sandbox, that you
come
can learn
on.
something new.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, you mentioned Stephen Graham Jones. I've really, really got into flash fiction quite recently, and he's just released a book of there's about 70 different stories. Is that something that you after having done this with Creepshow, is that something you might like to dabble in? Because I think for me,
I,
I don't obviously writing a novel is crazy difficult, but I just think that writing flash fiction and getting a story that's so as potent as they can be in like 1, 2 pages is so tough.
yeah, I've written a few. Now, in my mind, flash fiction is like 500 words or less. I don't know if that's what you're
Yeah,
meaning,
yeah.
but yeah, but I have never written a flash fiction piece. I It would be very hard for me because I'm very wordy. But I would like to challenge. I have written a couple of stories that were like 800 to 900 words. There's a story in my newest collection that I think is like 800 words, which is it's like one page.
Is that Traps
So
and Spectres?
no, is it in Traps and Specters or No One Is Safe? It's called The View. I think it might be in I think it might be in No One Is Safe. But I'd
All
have to
right, no,
look.
I thought you were talking about the one that you have coming out in September, the shortwave
In Traps and
short story.
Specters, there are some shorter stories as well. There's a couple like there's a couple in there that are like one or two pages.
Right.
There's one called The Hunter, and there's another one called, I'm just gonna look it up right here. I'm on my computer. The Black Rider is like really short. It's like 600 words. Um,
Yeah.
and then I wrote one called The Hunter, yeah, which is in here, which is actually was first in Forbidden Futures. So that's like 800 words. So I have done smaller pieces, and then The View I think is in No One Is Safe, which is one of my favorite short stories, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sometimes it works. I don't, man, but keeping it under 500 would be tough. I have
Uh-huh.
this idea that I might explore down the road if time permits. Um, I had this idea for a book. I don't know what the Stephen book is you're referencing, though. I'm curious about that because I had this book
I can't
called
remember the
that I
name,
want.
but it's just released. Hang on, I'll tell you.
Yeah, look
I've
it
got it
up.
written.
But I have a book that I want to write where it's just the whole book is it's like 25 vignettes. It's like 25
Yeah.
stories, and they're all around 1,000 words. Some less, some a little more, some a little less. Um, um, so that's an idea that I have for a book for a collection that I want to do. That I haven't. I actually am looking at the folder on my desk. I have a couple of those stories done already, but I have to. That would, that's down the road. I have so much. I can't get
So many
distracted. I
things
have so
going on.
many.
I'm
I have
the
so
same.
many deadlines. Yeah,
I'm the
I can't
same.
get
I've got so
distracted.
many different books that I'm reading for interviews that I get mixed up with the names and all different kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hang on,
yeah,
let
yeah,
me just find that name for you. I can't remember the name of the book now, but it's a brand new collection of flash fiction from
yeah. I don't know why I haven't
here it
heard of
is.
that.
States of Grace. Stories by Stephen Graham Jones. States of Grace.
Okay. I ordered a copy of that.
There's the cover.
Oh yeah, I think what that is. I think that's a reissue of an
It's
older
a reissue,
book.
but I think there's some
Yeah.
new stories in it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. No,
But no, yeah,
I
but
had
I'm
that
really
on
getting into
order.
it.
Oh, okay. Is it already out? Because I thought I ordered it.
Yes, it's already out. It's already out. Yeah, yeah. But I know I'm just because I read a story. I can't remember who it was by now, but I read a flash fiction story. I was like, wow,
Well,
it hits so hard, but it must be so hard to manage to make something hit so hard in so few words. So I've just really, really gotten into
it
that kind of thing.
is.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
If you have a copy of No One Is, I don't know if you have a copy of No One Is Safe, my last story
yeah, I have, yeah,
collection, but
yeah,
I think The View is in that story collection. And and you'd like it if you like short fiction pieces.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna, for all I know, to your point, I get so many books. For all I know, the that State of Grace book has come, and it's in a box somewhere. But
Yeah.
between publishers sending me stuff and authors sending me stuff and me buying like too many books,
Yeah, I mean,
I can't. It's hard to
I
keep
mean,
up.
it's bad enough for me just for reading so many books for interviews, but I can't imagine you because all authors they get sent books for blurbs all the time. So I mean, between
Yeah,
writing, reading, remembering your story, remembering the story that you're reading, it must be crazy.
yeah, and I've done a couple introductions, so you read for that, and
Yeah,
other authors have been kind enough to do
sure.
introductions for me. So
Ah, yeah,
it's just
because
part of it.
yes,
It's
that's true.
part of
Yeah,
what you
you've got
do.
the introduction to Daytide, Christianity as Daytide. You did the introduction,
Hmm. Yeah,
which I pre-ordered that one. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I wrote the introduction for Chris's book. I'm writing it. On my agenda for today is I have to write an introduction for a book I just finished reading for that's coming out in a deluxe edition. But it's one of those things that you try as an author, you always try and be to give back. I mean, I have had so many authors who have blurbed my books or written introductions. Like Nick Cutter wrote an introduction for Sarafina, for example, and
yeah,
Matt Dinneman wrote an introduction for Traps and Specters, and the introductions by Josh Mallerman and Ron Malfi and
yeah,
Laird Barron. So you try and also give that back to writers, who are looking
sure.
for stuff like that. Unfortunately, there is a limit. Um, there's only so many books you can read, so many books you can blurb. And I always feel bad. Usually right around the end of February, this is how right around the end of February is usually when I kind of cut off the year because by
Yeah.
then I usually have like, you know, 10 or 12 books to read before like call it May, April, June. So I usually just stop accepting anything after because then I want to spend some time reading other stuff
Other
that I
stuff
have
to
to,
it, kind of, and in the same kind
yeah,
of
that I
tone,
have on my
vein
own
that you want to write
shelves
your own stories. No, yeah,
or that I have research to do, and for future stories. So you read books for research and stuff like that. So you have to kind of like cut it off at a certain point. But yeah, but it's all part of like being a good part of the community, and you always want to help out people when you can because people have helped you out.
no. The horror community. I can't say in every interview, the horror community is just so. They just want to lift everyone up and up and up. It's just so good, so good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Well, the
Uh-huh.
horror community,
So,
the horror, I think what makes the horror community unique. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to truncate your thought, but I think what makes the horror community unique is we're kind of, unlike science fiction or fantasy, I think that we're pretty contained, and I think so anytime something good in horror happens, it's good for everybody. When
right.
Sinners is
It gets the
is a
Oscars or
monster,
whatever. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, when
sure.
Sinners
Yeah,
is a monster hit, when Weapons is a monster hit, when Stephen Graham Jones is a New York Times bestseller, when Rachel Harrison's a New York Times bestseller, when Paul Tremblay and these guys are like all that's good for it's good for them, but it's
yeah,
really good for everybody because all of a sudden people are like, oh, I love this book. What else is out there
yeah.
that's like this? And
Absolutely.
so yeah, so I think horror in specifically it's definitely the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. It's like we all are rewarded when somebody does really well.
Yeah,
So
you're all rooting for
um
everyone to do well. Yeah,
yeah, I mean I've had some movie stuff happen that I'm hoping is like going to open the floodgates for other, movie type stuff to happen for other authors because it's
yeah.
just because the horror people producers and studios are getting like really horror
They're
hungry.
really, really picking up everything. Matt Dinniman's is getting Dungeon Crawler that Carl's just been confirmed for a
Yeah.
series. You've got Failsafe, where it's now Skeletons is getting made. I think
Yeah.
Clementine Chapman's got a film getting made as well. It's just
Yeah.
producers are just really, really, really diving in on the in the onto the into the horror genre. Yeah,
Yeah, and like Alter, which has been made by A24, my short
and
story
Ultra as well.
Alter.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's coming out next year, and that's like that was published by a tiny independent press, Dunham's Manor Press, and it wasn't like it was a big, it wasn't a New York Times bestseller. It was literally, sold
Yeah.
hundreds of copies, if not thousands.
Yeah.
And now, but it was discovered and A24 made it. Failsafe was, again, that was in my first story collection, which was Behold the both the stories were my Behold the Void, and which was a small independent release. And that's now
Yeah.
going with Sony, and Bad Robots producing and all that. And but so yeah, it's good. They are looking, they are reading, they are finding stuff. You
And
got to get the work out there.
and not just the producers, but also the big five publishers, because I don't know if you know that TJ Payne's Intercepts is getting a reissued through Penguin.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Good for
yeah, yeah.
them.
It's getting a new one. Yeah, it's coming out on the 5th of May, that one, yeah. I've not
I
read
mean,
that
it was
one
such
yet,
a
so
monster. It was
I've
such a
not read that
monster
book.
hit, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think there was another. I can't. Oh, that's not public knowledge. Now I know what I'm thinking about. But there's other writers I know who have very indie releases who have caught the eye of big five presses and are now
Mhm.
have in conversations with those big five presses. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a route to go. I mean, Boys in the Valley originally was sold to Earthling, um, and as far as I knew at that time, that was it. That was going to be the book. Like
Yeah.
I had no other deals. I had no trade deal stuff. I wasn't even thinking about a trade deal for that book. I was like, we'll do it. I'll do it with Earthling, and it'll be out there, and I'll move on to the next thing. And then,
Uh-huh.
Stephen King tweeted about it, and Tor Nightfire picked it up, and we did a 2 book deal. So you never really know. But I'm always telling writers, get the work out there. It's just, you want to. It's so important to make work available in public, and not that you want
Uh-huh.
to rush it, and not that you want to do a bad job, but you had to look,
But
but
once
but
you've done it,
but
get it out there. Yeah.
but get it out there. Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's I sat on I sat on A Child Alone with Strangers for over a year while it was being shopped around and rejected, and it ultimately ended up getting picked up. But there was that was one of those things where I kind of like, I think if I could have done it over again, I would have maybe just gone to like a deluxe press instead
Right.
of doing a trade edition, and then maybe seeing if I could get a trade edition down the road. But yeah, so anyway, that's off topic. But yeah, I think it's for me, it's good. Like I wouldn't have a career right now if I hadn't been paid $25 for
Sure.
Mother, my first novelette that came out.
Yeah.
I was paid $25 for Alter, just because I wanted to get it out there. And I got a lot of negative
Yeah. Now it's gonna be a Hollywood movie.
blowback.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to me, it was like a demo tape. To me, it's like, hey, if I'm a band and I'm out there handing out demo tapes, at a club, demo tape for you guys, for everyone listening who's under the age of 50, demo tape. We used to put music on
Yeah.
cassettes, kids. But yeah, so you'd hand out those. Now you send
Yeah.
people file. I don't know what they do, send emails. But yeah, but yeah, my day when I was a music executive, yeah, the bands would. So I kind of thought of my writing career as sort of like I was like an upstart band trying to get people to hear my music.
Yeah.
And so for me, it wasn't about like I'm not looking to make a fortune on my first couple short stories. I'm trying to get my music out there.
Yeah.
And so that was my
And,
attitude at the
and
time.
I mean, now with the internet, with Reddit and Substack and all these stuff, it's just so easy for people to get the work out there if they want to.
Yeah, and if it catches fire, I mean, if it catches fire, man, it can change your life. I think of Eric LaRocca, when he had that his first I can't remember the title
Yeah.
of it, but
I can't remember. I know which one you mean. The first
his
one.
titles are long. Things are worse served than they have been. But the little book that he
Yeah.
put out with the small press, and it became like this TikTok sensation, right? And it led
Uh-huh.
to now he's got a career. I don't know how many books he's put out, whatever. And now he's with a big five
It
press,
just
Simon
doesn't
Schuster,
stop.
and
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think you never know. Especially to your point, in today's day and age, if anything can happen. But nothing will happen if it's sitting on your desk.
But, and I hate to talk about it, but at the same time, because AI is so damn prolific, it's
Yeah.
so
No, we can
difficult
talk about
for
AI.
people. Eh?
I said, no, we can talk about AI. I'm okay
No,
talking
no,
about
but,
AI.
but I just mean that it's so easy to get out people's work out there, but it's also so easy for people to write it off as AI, even if it isn't, unfortunately.
Yeah. it's interesting how the problem has evolved from AI is stealing our work, which is still true, but to now like, well, now the main problem seems to have transitioned into, or at least the argument, the online discussion seems to have transitioned into like, well, people are misrepresenting work as AI that's not AI.
Yeah.
And there's like it's almost like that it's like there's that like um alien paranoia, like in the Twilight Zone episode where, everyone's got the pitchforks and out. But you know what? It's the pitchforks and torches have always been, at the ready for a lot of people wanting to condemn creativity. I don't know the answer other than to state very clearly, which is something I do with my publishers, that and no in no way, shape, or form has any of the ideas or the writing of this book been, been has AI been used in any facet of the creation of this book or this story. And I just think you have to kind of make it clear now. I think is probably the
Yeah.
answer. You have to state it up front. And I think it was I think Penguin ran about somebody just came out recently, one of the big five presses, and said
No, it was was it Harper Press? Harper Press, I think it was.
maybe, and they said there was
Obviously, I don't
be
want to name names, but
well,
I think it
well,
was
well,
Harper
there was a
Press.
press. Well, there's one press that said we're now going to use AI to do translation, which was very
It may have been
upsetting.
that one. It may have been that
I
one.
think
It
it was
was
Harper,
Harper.
but then you have other publishers, like I think it was Penguin, who came out and said we will never publish AI, and so yeah, it's I think as an author, your best bet is to just make sure that it's very. I think we're at
Mhm.
that point now where you have to say, no, I'm not, I do, and
Yeah.
I do not use AI in the creation of my work, and for me, that means no, that means your ideas. I'm not talking about you're using AI to write. I'm talking about you're using it. If you're using Chat GPT to generate ideas, you're using AI,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Sorry
Uh-huh.
for those who disagree. In my opinion, if you're using, I don't know. Well, I don't know what LLM. I don't know all this. I don't even look at any of this stuff. But I don't know what Claude is or LLM or any of that shit. But I will tell you this: if you're getting at your ideas or your stories from AI, then you're not writing those stories.
Hmm.
And if you're using AI to write stories, then you're really not writing those stories.
Yeah.
You're plagiarizing at that point.
Yeah.
So I'm really very adamant against the usage of AI. Here, I think AI should be used for science. I think AI should be used for medicine. I think there are
Yeah.
great uses for that technology. I
What
do not
I
think
mean,
AI should be touching. Like, what are you gonna do? Have AI painting? Now you have the AI
yeah.
movies. You have AI. Creativity should not be computer generated. I mean,
Yeah.
in that sense,
The only thing
it
that I
should
use
be
it for
human
now
generated.
is I have no idea how to program the website that I use. So whenever I
Yeah,
want to like fancy buttons or something, I can't do that. So I'll just ask. I will ask ChatGPT to do that for me because I can't program HTML. But apart
yeah. I
from that,
think to say no. I think to sit. I think for anyone to sit in a room right now and say nobody should use any AI period for anything is first of all hypocritical, because
yeah,
anytime you Google search you're using AI. I hate to say it.
yeah,
And
it comes
then
up
and
first. Yeah,
then and then the other thing is this: there's a million uses for AI that's really beneficial. Where I draw the line is if you're a creator, if you're an artist, then that art needs to come from you and only
yeah,
you. That's where I draw the line, and I think that's as clean as I can make it.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And if you use AI to write professionally, you're plagiarizing.
Yeah. But that brings me to another question. I mean, obviously, you must know the story of Mia Ballard, and it was that apparently it was the editors of her book that used
Oh,
AI. So has that made you more kind of conscious of what happens to your writing once you've given it to your publishing house?
yeah, that's such a he said, she said on all that stuff. But
Yeah, yeah,
well, first of
absolutely.
all, there's a couple things about that. First of all, I think I would know if my editor used AI to give me feedback on a book. And I'll tell you guys listening why that is. Because when you get notes on a book, the notes are from your editor and they're very subjective. Now, meaning I can see a note from making up a name, Charlie, that says, "Hey, Philip, what do you think about does this paragraph did make sense for the characters?" It's very human. The notes are very human, and I would know if it was now where I don't think I would maybe know is when you get to the proofreading stage. Just like when you're using Microsoft Word now and it keeps telling you, draws those red lines or blue lines under a word because
Yeah.
it's telling you it's the wrong usage. I think that from a proofing perspective, it would be hard for me as a writer to know whether or not they were using some sort of computer program or whether they had an actual person sitting there talking. But even then, I talk to my proofreaders. We have discussions. We have back and forth, and to the point sometimes where, and we'll like, as a writer, you get to agree or disagree on a change. Like, no, I want the M dash there. No, I don't want a paragraph break there.
I
It's
refuse to use M dashes anymore, just in case anyone starts to
not
say that.
me. Like I'm not changing the way I write for anything, I get that. The same thing with translation. We talked about there's
That's
that one publisher who
that's my
said
day job is translation. Yeah, so
yeah, so translation for me is like I have had a lot of my work translated, and uh and I had emails from the translators saying, where there's no apples to apples, from the English, U.S. English to Czechoslovakian or Russian
yeah,
or French or whatever it is, and they're saying like, well, this doesn't really translate. What do you think about this? Or they'll say, what did you mean when you use this metaphor? Because we don't understand this metaphor here.
yeah,
So there are things like that that we go through. I go through with translators, which is something that a computer
sure.
generated translation would not cough up. And
Yeah,
so I think anytime you're talking about creativity, you need a human to be the one who's dealing with it. I just don't think I think because even the thing with fiction is to my earlier point about the semicolon thing, right? Where the author who left his publisher because they removed a semicolon without his permission. I think because punctuate, because we're not we as authors, fiction writers, we know the rules, but we bend the rules. So a
yeah,
computer won't necessarily. Yes, they can probably figure out our tendencies, but there may be a comma that they put in because this is where technically a comma goes. Grammatically speaking, this is correct.
yeah.
This is where a comma goes. And it's like, yeah, no, I don't want a comma there because I want the prose to read faster.
Yeah,
I
you
want
want
the
the pacing to
I'm
kind of to get
right,
the reader
yeah,
to feel more dread or whatever you want to do with a
or
specific.
whatever. Yeah, and there's a million examples like that. So I think where I all caps a word that's like, I have a roar where I use a bunch of
Yeah,
O's and A's, and ours.
yeah,
So I think you always have to have a human dealing with stuff like that. But yeah, so to answer your question more directly, I am very aware now that AI is kind of infiltrating multiple different layers um, of the creative process, but I would like to think that I would know if an editor was coming back to me with AI generated thoughts versus their own
yeah.
thoughts. I think
Uh-huh.
if you have a good relationship with your editor, you guys
You
it's a
know
back
more
and
or
forth.
less.
It's a back and forth. It's not like an editor doesn't tell a writer what to do. An editor makes a suggestion
Yeah,
and they have a reason for making that suggestion. And then you as a writer decide what you want to do. And,
I
uh,
imagine you get on the telephone as well, and
yeah,
a
or
human conversation.
yeah, and I'm on Zooms with editors all the time, and we're having
Sure.
conversations about stuff. So yeah, so I think it's, I think it's, I don't think I think you would know. And the last thing I wanted to say about it was in regards to maybe this specific example where this woman was saying that there was an editor, the Shy Girl author, was saying this editor had used AI and they weren't aware of it. Um, Here's why and I don't want to get into like he said, she said, but I'll just give you my opinion on that is when I get notes back, if somebody had written a paragraph of prose into one of my stories, that would be a huge, huge red flag.
Red flag.
Now,
Yeah,
and frankly, it would piss me off if I'm being completely
yeah,
frank, because that writers I mean, most writers who write for the art of writing, not for the commercialization of writing, are very, very particular about if you change one word, I want to know why you think you're changing that. What you like
Yeah.
that about that word that is different than what I originally wrote. If you're writing prose into my story, we have a problem.
That's
If
not your
you're
book anymore. It's hit yours
right,
and
because I
their
didn't
book.
write that. If you write a sentence into my story, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So for this author to say, "Oh, well, all this AI was generated by the editor, and I didn't know it," it's like, well, then you're not paying attention to your own book, very
Yeah.
humble opinion. And I'm not trying to take sides against this because I know there's a lot of controversy about,
Sure.
but I'm just saying, generally speaking, if I were to get a manuscript back and there was prose injected into my manuscript, we would have a problem. It's not. My
Yeah.
point is, it's not common. Okay, it's not. It's very
Yeah.
uncommon. So to be oblivious to prose being inserted in your book is kind of a lot. I guarantee you, a lot of writers are like, I don't know
Yeah.
about that. I think a
Mhm.
lot of readers who don't really understand, maybe don't know the way the machinations of the process could buy it. But as writers, we know that's not how it would work.
Yeah.
So I find that very hard to
Yeah.
believe.
I can't remember who it was, but I also saw that even authors were complaining that interviewers were creating questions using AI as well, which was crazy. I mean,
See, I'm not that.
this is what I'm using right now, pen and paper.
See,
It's
and
it.
I think that's kind of, I think there's, I just don't think you can realistically be that hard line about it. That's, I think the only realistic hard line you can have is if you are creating art on a professional level and you are putting your name on that art, then it's got to be you. It's got to be 100% you. It's got to be something you dreamed, something you came up with, some idea you had. And the prose has to be your you and your voice, and you have to struggle over each word and how you're going to write it and like all that stuff. And it's not something that you would ever use AI to generate. And I think that's
Yeah.
where I say, I think anything outside of that, I think is you're being really unrealistic because the world is changing, it's evolving. AI is here. It's so integrated into everything we do on a day-to-day basis. So like if someone were to if some interviewer were to put into, I don't know how it works. I've never used AI in my life, but if someone were to put in the sense of like an app, but if someone were to put in some AI app, like what are good questions to ask Philip Fracassi about his last book, and they pulled a couple of questions from that or used them to form other questions. I'm not gonna like slam down my microphone and storm out of the auditorium or whatever. I mean,
Oh, yeah, sure.
I get it, but I think because we're doing an interview. I think if we're not selling, you're not putting this in a binding and selling for
Uh-huh.
28.95 and putting your name on it. I just think it's there. You're
Yeah.
not hanging it in a museum. You're not,
Yeah.
you're not broadcast. I just think there's a difference between art. Now, but it sucks. Is I used to be. It's such a touchy subject because I used to be a copywriter. I was a copywriter for a marketing
Right.
company, and that was my job. Like I was paid to do it. So now those jobs are going away because companies are using AI to write copy. No journalists are complaining that there's AI being written to write articles, for newspapers like the Washington Post, the New York
Yeah.
Times. And so that's where things become really fuzzy. And you always want that I don't know, I just wish, I guess in my perfect world, AI would be used to cure cancer and not to, make Brad Pitt movies.
100%. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. And also, just to finish before I let you go, I mean,
Yeah.
the thing that I hate the most about AI is the fact that whenever I'm writing an article or coming up with questions, it forces me to think what AI would come up with, so that I have to think of something completely different rather than just thinking my own questions. You know what I mean? Which I
Yeah. I think
guess,
that's a
I
slippery. I think
guess
that's
kind of
I think
would
you're
be the
being too hard
same
on
for
yourself.
writers as well now, because it's such you have to kind of become very self-aware of yourself, and that people are gonna, if they can find a phrase that sounds AI, they will
You
pick up on
know,
it. Try and
I'll be honest with you, Art. I don't worry about that at all.
no,
I don't worry about it at all. No, it never, and honest to God, never enters my mind. And I think that's just because I know, I know the way I write. I know the way I create. I don't think about the M dash thing. I don't think about tendencies. I don't think about, I
yeah,
just don't, I don't know enough of, honestly, I don't even know enough about, outside of the M dash thing, which I know is like a big thing initially. Now it's something else. I just don't
yeah,
pay enough attention to, I don't care enough to know. I'm so, I'm so in it's such an internal process that I
Yeah.
don't think I think I tell you what I do think about when I'm writing. I think about I think about what readers will think. Um, you know, I worry about I worry about is this going to create blowback if people are, is this going to be, if somebody who is sensitive about this subject and are like
Yeah.
make a big,
Cancel culture. Yeah.
or is it right? I'm much more, but yeah, I'm much more worried about cancel culture, and I'm much more worried about, um, reader sensitivity than I am about AI. But
Mhm.
even that, I have to force it out of my head. I have to write what I want to write. But there's a balance to that too. And we're not. I don't want to get into a whole different thing. But
No.
obviously you want to have a certain sensitivity to what you're writing. But I guess my point is that but I think I worry more about reader response because I'll tell you, when you've been a writer, a professional writer, a published writer for 10 years, and you've read negative reviews of your work over those 10 years, and like thousands of negative and positive, obviously, but thousands of positive and negative
Uh,
reviews, it's impossible not to have those creep up
not to think about.
into your head
Sure.
when you're like writing something specific and you're like, oh, I wonder if like this is going to have this kind of effect on, and then you have to like force yourself to not think that way. But yeah,
Yeah.
but as far as I'm not worried at all about the AI at all. The only caveat to that, as I mentioned this earlier, is I would want to make it clear in all my future books, for example, it's already in all my contracts.
Right.
No AI, but so that's both ways. That's I don't you can't use AI and I can't use. There's no AI in the production of this book. The publisher and author agrees, and
Uh-huh.
but I
Just
think
out of interest, are there any controls over that?
just the contract, just what
I'm not putting you in doubt at all, but I'm just saying because there's various people involved in the process. Is there some kind of quality control to make sure that doesn't happen?
well, you have to just kind of like can't police Random House. You have to assume that if they're saying no AI will be used in the production of this book, whether it be the cover art or the editing or the proofing, or the layout or whatever it is, all the different things that
Hmm.
go into a book, I can't police that. All I can do is say contractually, you're not allowed to
Yeah.
use AI. I'm not
Okay.
allowed to use AI. I mean, it's just like when you put into a contract, I'm saying because and this has been from the beginning of time, as it were. I'm saying you have to say in every agreement that you do, every contract that you just say, this is my book. Every word of this is mine, meaning I
Yeah.
didn't plagiarize it. I didn't
Sure.
steal somebody else's idea. And it's this AI is just like it's just another
Yeah. Another level of that. Yeah.
small cap letter under the big cap letter in that contract, which is like, and I did not use AI to write any of this book
Yeah.
either. And so I think in the future, what you'll see is on that copyright page where they have all the copyrights and material, and the rights
But probably
fine print. You're going to
no
see
AI. Yeah.
no AI was used in the writing or production of this book. I would welcome that in all of my
Yeah.
books, and I would love to see that. I would really welcome it if publishers started putting that in all of their books. I think
Yeah.
there might because even if they state it, the liability would be on the writer. If like let's say the writer lied to them, yeah, but in the contract, you said you swore, and the liability is on you if you're lying in your contract. And so if you
Yeah.
said you didn't use AI and then it comes out a year later that you did, that's on you, and you're the one who's going to get sued. And frankly,
Yeah.
the publisher will probably sue the writer in that instance,
Sure. Yeah.
just like the publisher would sue a writer if they found out that half the book was plagiarized from another book that was stolen. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I would love to see I would love to see that language start becoming uniform in all publications. Um,
Yeah.
and I would love for writers to just stop using it. I just would love it to not be even a consideration. Not just writers, like I said, if you're a painter, if you're a songwriter, if you're a poet, if you're any kind of artist, you're any kind of creative, professional creative, it has to come from you. It has to. Otherwise, what are you doing? Why do you want to be a writer if you're not going to write?
Yeah.
Why you want the commercial success? You can have my commercial
Yeah.
success. Like
Uh-huh.
it's no one's buying yachts.
Yeah.
We're all struggling. So even the ones who are New York Times bestsellers, I mean, I saw an author yesterday who was a legit New York Times bestseller 20 years ago who was saying selling stuff to pay their rent.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're, you know, I don't know why anybody would want to cheat their way into becoming a writer. I think you're either passionate about it or you're not.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's obviously the people who use AI to do that is just in it for a quick buck and little else. Yeah, absolutely.
There's no bucks to be had, but yeah,
No, but you
yeah.
know,
I just wish they would. I
yeah.
wish they'd go do something else and go
Uh,
stay in their basement or their whatever and
uh.
leave the rest of us alone.
I mean, obviously, I don't like the fact that there's been that online bullying with the author that we've just been talking about. But I am at the same time glad that it has come to light, so that publishing houses, like you said, that may start writing at the beginning of the book that there's no AI involved and those kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm anti-bully across the board. I've never like, I think anyone who bullies on social media is a coward. And I think it's just people love, like I said, what did I say earlier? People, the pitchforks and torches are standing by. Anytime anyone has a free hour in their day
Yeah, yeah, the
and they got
keyboard
a,
warriors are free all the time.
and their computer, they want to get in there and like say give their 5 cents or they want to give their nickel about everything. And it's like, just, I don't know. I'm more, you know, I fall on the side of kindness. I fall on the side of, a lot of people have come out against other, a lot of writers and people have come out against other writers about like, you're not saying enough about this. And it's like, well, for me, it's like, I'm not going to say anything about anything unless I understand all the
Yeah, you know
facts.
all about it.
I
Yeah,
know exactly unless I'm personally invested to the point where I know exactly what's going on. I'm not going to spout my mouth about something I only know half the story of.
yeah,
And
sure.
and I think the people who do that just are doing it because they got nothing else to do.
Yeah,
But but yeah, there's no point in bullying. And it's so silly and it's so unnecessary. And but it's also one of those things where it's like, and like for example, when that whole thing came out, my takeaway from that was, and I really wasn't looking at it in too much detail. I have too much work to do. But one of my takeaway from that was, is I did feel like I should make sure that my position is clear. Like when,
yeah. You like
it's like when the
to stay
Black Lives movement was when the Black Lives movement was happening. I made my position clear. I started a fundraiser to raise $25,000 for Black Lives Matter. Like there's sometimes you have to take a stand, but sometimes that stand doesn't have to be attacking somebody else. The stand should be
no.
about you. So my
Yeah,
position was, okay, well, I see all this going on. I definitely, I was thinking about it a lot, and I was like, I feel like I should at least make a statement about where I stand on this. I'm not going to talk about the writer. I'm not going to talk about the book. I'm not going to reference any of the other stuff I've read about. I'm just going to talk about me and I did. I made a post where I simply said, in
hmm
so many words, I do not use AI in the creation of
yeah,
my art, and and that was it because I was like, okay, that's my position. Now I can move on and to the rest of my life. So yeah, people who are out there doing all that stuff and making it their life mission to bring down other people is nothing I'm interested in or have any I think it's shameful, honestly,
hmm
and I think people should focus on themselves and stop worrying about everybody else. But I do think the awareness level is important to your point
yeah,
because people do need to be like that editorial AI thing was really like that was something I saw the same article that I'm sure you did. That was like and it wasn't about the shy girl thing. It was a recent article that came out about editorial being used by a publisher, and I was like, oh man, that's something now I have to start thinking about. To your point,
yeah,
it's definitely in my consciousness, and especially with cover art, and stuff like that. You just want to make sure you're working with artists, who are not using AI to create the artwork, and it's just too bad because it seems like common sense,
yeah,
but it seems like artistic morality that you wouldn't want to use a computer to generate a name, something that you're putting your name on. But yeah, I guess it's the world we're living in now, and times change. Like I'm not going to be that old guy screaming at the clouds. Um, but I am gonna find a balance, and I'm gonna make sure that there is a line. Um, because I think we're not AI is not going back in the box.
no, no.
So
Yeah, yeah, but no, but it's not going back in the box, but it's up to us to do something to make sure that art and creativity remains as fresh and human
yeah,
as possible.
let's use AI to send it like, like the Artemis 2, like God bless them. I'm sure those guys rely on computers to do the math to send that spaceship to the moon. And that's, God bless them. That's great. Like I said, let's cure cancer. Let's stop making Brad Pitt movies. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, I mean, creative is being a writer is such a lonely, independent, internal job. And I think to bring, there are writers I know who don't even like input from like from readers, from like beta readers or
Yeah.
they're just so it's so sacred to them, and I think it has to remain sacred because it's such a it's such an individual thing, and it's such a reflection of who you are as a person, in a way. And it's your voice, and you're expressing your heart, and you're expressing your trauma, and you're expressing your own beliefs and your life, what you've gone through in your life, and the events of your life and your emotional state, and to cheat that by using a computer to fill in the blanks or to tell your story, just I can't even fathom it personally. I just don't see why you would even want to go there.
Yeah. But we completely deviated from the book.
We weren't going to do it, but we did.
From Civil War all the way to AI. We
Yeah,
managed
good.
it.
We covered it. Yeah.
We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So listen, congrats, like I said, congratulations on the book. Sarafina is great. I can't wait for it to come out and hear what people think about it. I'm sure they're going to love it. Will you be taking it on tour a little bit over the next few weeks?
No, I'm unfortunately I have
No.
a mountain of deadlines. I have to be tied to my desk for the next couple months. Um, no, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to San Diego. I'm doing an event at Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego. I live in Los Angeles, so it's a quick drive for
Yeah.
me. So anyone who wants a signed wants to pre-order a signed copy of the book, I'm directing all those people to Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego.
Yeah.
I'm doing one big launch event there, and that's probably going to be it. And then I have because I have a book coming out in September, Traps and Specters,
Yeah, the shortwave book. Yep.
the Shorewave book. You have the story collection, and then I have a book coming out in April of next year, which is Gothic: The End, which is a sequel to my novel Gothic. So as I said, I'm working on that, and then I'm going to be doing edits on that. I owe like 4 short stories. I owe a novella. I owe a couple introductions, all in the next like 3 months. And then I'm probably going to be traveling over the summer because that Sony movie, I'm probably going to be going to set, and it's
All
going to
right.
be out of country, so that's going to be a thing. And then I have another novel coming out next summer, The Blue Butterfly, which I'll be doing edits on over the course of the late summer and fall. So I just don't have a lot of time to travel right now, and I've already booked some events here and there, but um, yeah, no tour. But I'm hoping to do a more robust tour for the Blue Butterfly next summer.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more in line
Oh,
with what I did with Autumn Springs and Boys in the Valley. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, but even though you're not doing lots of events, there's so many signed copies that are available, both over
Yeah.
there and also over here in the UK with
Yeah.
the
Yeah. All
Black.
those Black Crow deluxe editions are signed.
Yeah.
I think there's a limit. I think they have a limitation of 1,000. So there's a lot of those available.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, the trade editions will be signed. Yeah, the book
Uh-huh.
comes out on Tuesday the 7th. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then,
Around the corner.
yeah, that'll probably be it for Serafina. And then, hopefully word of mouth and reviews are positive and people pick up the book.
Uh-huh. I'm sure they will do. Yeah, well, listen, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, Phil, and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon, whether it be about Traps and Spectres or about the next book you mentioned. Was with Tor Nightfire, no? The next one.
No,
Sorry,
Gothic, the end. No, yeah, Gothic 2 is going to be coming out from
Gothic 2
Clash.
before.
That's Clash in next April, assuming I get the book done. That's Clash and Black Crow in the UK. And then
Yeah,
the next book
the next one.
is Union Square Hachette, Blue Butterfly. And I
Right.
don't know
Okay.
who the UK publisher is
Right.
going to be for that
Yeah.
yet, but
Okay.
it'll be Union Square here in the US.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck with Sarafina, and I hope to speak to you again about one of these next books sometime
I would
soon.
love that. Yeah, anytime,
Yeah.
Howard. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate the time. All right. Have a
All right,
great
brother.
day.
Take
Take
care.
care of yourself.
All right.
Bye now.
Bye.